why I play these tech choices. Rosenix is not necessarily played because it doesn't contribute to your end board, it doesn't contribute to your actual combo. It's more so of a niche option that you can try out. And the reason why I'm playing it is because I'm playing Adventure. And loads of times you get your token off the field sometimes, your Adventure token. So you adding Dracoback becomes redundant. It becomes irrelevant after it gets off the field. You can use it for the following turn, but I want to get value off of it that same turn, which is why I'm playing this. But for the most part, Coral Dragon is here because we play Adventure. And sometimes you open up a card combination of these two, and you need to find a way to synchro, because of course you can synchro away the Griffin, but more often than not, you're going to want to use its negation effect before you continue, right? So the way it would go would be you activate, right? You get your token, you place your Fateful, right? And then whether you choose to just search right away or not, it'll depend on your hand, because if you have a Crystron card that you can discard, you just search right away. But if you don't, then you just go summon, trigger, giving you access to your Dracoback. You then search in your Griffin, discarding your Dracoback, equipping, and then you summoning your Griffin, right? Into a board, somewhere along these sequence, they're going to interact with you. And that's the point. You want to make sure that you prompt responses before you could actually get into your Crystron sequencing, right? Especially if you have extenders like Sofufnir, you have inclusion. You want to make sure that you force everything before then, right? So right here, you're already baiting an Ash on this. You're baiting an Ogre on this, possibly, right? But the reason why you want a 6 compared to a 9, although you could go for a 9, you can synchro here for a Vermilion, but more often than not, you're going to want to go effect bounce, they're going to negate, or they're going to chain something in response, then you're going to use your negate to counter that, and then you're going to be left with these two, right? That's why you need a 6. So let's say, for example, you go bounce, that's one interaction, negate, and then now you're here. This is why the 6 is so important. And you synchro into your Coral. So already 2 cards, you're able to bait so many things into a board. Of course, if it's against a particular matchup like Yugioh, it can be a bit different. So you need a different approach because the pop is quite devastating. But you have other ways to mitigate that, whether it be you open up your hand traps, simplify the game state, you draw into Imperm, draw into Droplet, stuff like that. But this is just showcasing what you can do with just those 2 cards, the way it can unravel into a board. Then now you've used 1 Dracoback. Now this is the 3rd thing. You can discard a card, whether it be anything, right? You can discard any Crystron. That'd be good. You pop a card. Whether they impermanent or not, it's completely up to them. Who knows what they might have. And then after you've done all that, then you finally go into your on Tristaros effect, where you banish it, pop in your Coral, right? And then you would summon your 2 and preferably a 5. Because if you do 2 5s, you're vulnerable to Nibiru, and you miss out on your extension, right? So if the Nib here, you chain that, and you go into Samurai, and they can continue. So then now, this will trigger, so chain 2, assuming they didn't ash you earlier. I'm not sure why they wouldn't. But they would most likely ash you here, right? On the effect of that. But if they don't, then fair enough. Most likely this would have baited the ash, which is why this is so good. You then dump your yellow and your purple, right? Then you go ahead and continue your sequence. Banish to add your Smiger. You then pitch first Sofufnir, right? Help itself, effect to summon. And since we have other options like the turtle, or we play Rosenix, you can summon either or, right? But since you're trying to get into your end board, which you still surely can, you will summon another 5. You then activate the effect Smiger, getting you access to your inclusion. Then you activate inclusion, searching your cluster. And then you synchro first, whether it be a Lesk adding you back something, right? Or it's just making your Dragster right away. In some instances, you do go Dragster right away because you don't want to give them a chance to activate anything, right? So you want to be reactive as soon as possible. And then you can go effective this, pop this, and then you go Infinity. You go Nova, Infinity. And then right here, if you wanted to, you can just banish this to revive your Trist and still have option to go for the combo. But that's the reason we play Cold Drag, just to be disruptive, to be able to just push through boards and force for prompt responses as soon as possible before you actually start your combo. Because although that is a 2-card combo, odds are you might have access to inclusion, right? Which would then search this. You might have access to, right? To ensure that you first try to disrupt and then try to play. Because if you try to play into a board without having to bait anything, your main sequence is going to be disrupted and you're not going to be able to progress and end on a board, right? But because of the times where the token gets removed off the field, that's where the Rosenix comes into play, right? Because it's unexpected. There's a lot of times where Adventures has been out for a while, so most people are well aware of what it's capable of doing. So once they realize that your token's gone, they think this is basically useless. But because you play a card that generates a token, you can retain its value, right? It's not just a blank card anymore. It's another interaction. So sometimes you might dump that with your Software, right? And the grave effect is banish it to special a token, which is a Crystron card, and it cannot be tributed, which is interesting. So you just get a token, and then now you have access to this, equipping it, and then bouncing another card and forcing before you actually commit to your board or start finalizing your board. You want to get to a Lesk with no interactions, right? Because that's where its mid through sequence ensures that you're basically resolving it. And I think just being able to have that as an option. I know it's more of a practical use because in a vacuum it doesn't really do anything for your board, but it's just the toolboxiness of it that I can appreciate. And there's other applications as well, not just strictly for that, but that's the primary one. But being able to just banish it, giving you a token, giving you access to your Clockwork Knight is huge, because there are times where you need to revive your Tristaros, right? You maybe have a spare, I don't know, Crystron that you don't really want, right? If you've been keeping up with streams, I've been showcasing a few things you can do with this guy. Sending a spare this to revive your Tristaros, or even reviving your Dragster, right? Or just getting a Crystron card on board if you don't have inclusion. You can pop the token for your Sophador. And because there's all these things you can do with it, you have to consider the level, right? Because that means you can get access to a level 6, and that's where this guy comes in. And the cool thing about this guy is that the turn it's Synchro summoned, it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, and you take no damage. So for example, let's say for whatever reason, because Crystron decks have so much non-engine, they have so much non-engine, that sometimes you just open up Trist and hand traps. And the fact that you can possibly just end on this is hilarious, right? Let's see, open up a bunch of hand traps, right? And Tristaros. I'm not saying this is optimal, but it's just something that the deck has available, right? So you summon this, and then you trigger it, right? You summon this guy. You Synchro into your Insectron. So now he can't, the only way they can get rid of it is if they banish it or bounce it, right? But they can't run it over, they can't destroy it, so you're fine. With that in mind, with all the hand traps that you have, you can time them a bit better, because usually what happens is when you win first and you pass and your hand is like this, you're kind of scared that you might get OTK'd, because these cards don't really destroy. This one does, but more often than not, -1 hand traps like Imperm, Ash, Effect Vader, they still get to keep their resource, right? So they can link it away and then try and push for game because they were able to keep it. But because you're not going to lose, you're not going to get wiped out completely, you can afford to just save these a lot longer in the sequence, which is great. And if they don't get rid of it, you would have depleted your hand, you would have possibly trolled, you would have ogred, you would have done something, right? So now you're here. So now they've depleted their push, I guess. And now you're, right, so you're top decking. And then now you have a Synchro that you can pop with Tristaros and attempt again, right? And if they have an interaction there, well then you were in losing position anyways. But the fact that you have that as an option is why you have to consider this, because you're playing Rosenix. And I think that's pretty good. And it's come up a few times where I was like, oh, you can start your turn with like an SP as well, right? So let's say this is in your grave, right? So then you started with these 2 cards. So you can do is like banish this, right? Get yourself a token, link this away into your Clockwork Knight. And then what you can do here is you can go effect, send the machine to summon a machine from your graveyard with 1,000 or less attack, right? So let's say you top decked into, I don't know, like, I don't know, preferably inclusion, I guess. You could also go, okay, oppress them with the effect of your Tristaros. So let's say you start with this, right? You can even go into SP as well before you continue. Assuming you want to bait 2 interactions, like SP banish, and then you chain response again. Then you activate this and clear the board, right? So that, like little things like that make that worthwhile, right? Because then you can just do this, they respond, okay, chain, get yourself a door, then pop off from there, which is quite nice. It seems trivial, seems like it's insignificant, but it actually makes the biggest difference. And if you're about to lose in time, or if you're approaching time, you can ensure that you're not going to get burned, because you can get burned. You take no damage, which is great. And that's basically the tech choices I'm currently using within Rosenix. We've been on Coral Dragon for a while now. This is not really new. Early on in the deck building process, this is something that I felt was essential because of the 2 and the 4. And I like it a lot. Into a board, bring it up pressure, and that's basically all I wanted to talk about. It's just something to try out. If you haven't tried the Adventure variant before or yet, give it a shot. Try this out. It's a lot of fun. It's a bit more technical, of course. It's not straightforward as a pure Crystron is, because pure Crystron is quite simple. Like there's not much. It's basically like the way the pure Crystron plays is hand trap you like 3 times versus top deck into engine. It's quite simplistic. It's very predictable, which is something I'm not a fan of, but it is efficient, so that's perfectly fine. And it's extremely cheap as well. It's so budget, which is a plus. It's a satellite deck, which is awesome. But I like to have a bit of obscurity, not necessarily being so telegraphed, right? Because you usually win when you get into the later rounds. Like in the early rounds, it's quite easy to win that way. But in the later rounds, that's when your opponent knows exactly what you're doing. And if you throw them an odd card variation, they're not going to really know what to do. So that's where you capitalize against the better players. But that's going to be it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you haven't, and thanks for watching.